it's actually been a while since I've been in the B&H event space. I've done many events here, sans the beard, so maybe this is my first bearded event. And Ryan has facial hair, and we're both bald, so this
and it's my first event, so.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. So yeah, I do. So the other part of being a producer and a director of photography is I'm also an educator. So I'll do a little spiel in the beginning just about what I do for a living and the types of content that I create, and talk a little bit about what I do in the education space. And then I'm actually going to allow Ryan, because we've also been doing some other stuff downstairs for a while, to sit down for a little while. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the future of production. So you might think that this is just going to be gear related, but I really want to talk about, to everybody who's watching, sort of where we're going and things that we need to think about with modern digital camera systems, and some of the considerations that we have to have in terms of just general production, those types of things. And that'll sort of be the keynote presentation, and it'll be a Q&A. My style of teaching is definitely very conversational, so I'm hoping that while I can't get questions from people who are watching the webinar, that you in the audience will definitely converse with myself and also Ryan and ask questions, because we're all basically, if we're in production, trying to be problem solvers. That's really our goal, right? We want to create something, we want to tell stories, but one of the things, at least that drives me, is that I love what I do for a living, because it's always about solving problems. We're always presented with problems. How do we solve those problems? So hopefully we're doing something for a living that is never boring, and hopefully not the same every single day. So, so let me just go ahead and talk a little bit about that. But before I do that, I do want Ryan to introduce himself a little bit more and talk a little bit about his background, as somebody who has had a lot to do with a lot of, well, basically all of the products that we're going to look at today, except for some lighting products from Westcott. So I'm going to turn that over to you first, and then I'll do that. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Well, my name's Ryan. I'm Director of Product Development for a new product in lighting. It started as a pro audio recording studio mic stand. And it was soon where producers like Jem came up to us and said, you guys are missing something here. This is a better lighting stand than what's on the market today. And C-stands are always a problem. The size, the way they function, the way they travel, they're an issue. So we've taken a stand of this size, and if you would, sir.
Wait, can you stand up and do that? Can you come over here?
Here we go.
Yeah. So just feel it, and yeah. So we have an extremely heavy stand. This stand weighs about as much as a C-stand, but look how small it is, and look how many you can pack into a very small place. And so C-stands, they're a necessary evil, but we may have gotten around that. So this stand opens up and basically looks like a lighting stand or a mic stand. But like a C-stand, the legs can physically articulate. So I can find angles into around corners, odd spaces. The Rocky Mountain leg of a C-stand is that easy. I can also reduce this footprint to very small. It's half the size. That allows me to get stands in tight places around other stands, and look at how small of a space we're having here. So the legs allow you to functionally put this stand anywhere. And now you notice there's nothing there, there's no heads. Well, we have 8 different kind of heads. And in our world, your world, a light, you would put your light on here, screw it on with that old-fashioned screw and leave it, and walk up and lock it in. We have a 1/4-20, we have a 3/8, we have a 5/8, we have a large baby pin, we have the small lighting stud with a 1/4-20, we have a GoPro, and we have a male-to-male reversal. And I'll show you how to use that. Also, these stands have air-loaded shafts, so if you did happen to loosen a clutch and drop a light, it's not going anywhere. And in a minute, once we get into this production, you'll see that basically all of our stands and booms are based on ball joints. So being able to get a stand in any possible position at any time and make it a light, a mic, a camera, anything you need in production, it's that easy. So with Jem's work in production, he found us and said, I'm using these instead of lighting stands. And I'd like to work along with you guys and help you grow in the lighting world, because I'm a recording studio engineer. I don't know that much about lighting. I'm an amateur. I'll shoot bad film. So we're going to come up with Jem. He's going to teach us how to use this product. I'm going to be his grip today. He's going to tell me what to set up, and I'll get creative with Triad-Orbit and show you how you can get creative with such a small stand in this space.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I mean, for me personally, well, you know what? I'll tell you about myself briefly, and then we'll kind of go from there. So, depending on the day of the week, I'm one of those things, sometimes combinations of them. And I have had a production company now for over 21 years. And I do a lot of different types of production. And then the other half of my life is the C47, which is an educational brand, which is focused on teaching the craft of video production and filmmaking. So I'm kind of in this weird in-between world where on a very regular basis, I would say that more than 70% of what I do for a living is actual production. Sometimes I'm a producer-director, sometimes I'm a DP, sometimes I'm combinations of those things. And then I also get to go into classrooms and I teach workshops, and I've been a professional, quote-unquote, teacher for about 17 years now. So I've been teaching both post-production and production. I started the C47 because there was, when the 5D, it was just happened to be the time when the 5D Mark II came out, there was a lack of education in the production space. So there was very little. It's very different now, obviously. There's some amazing YouTube channels out there. There's some amazing educators out there. There's tours that go out that are teaching production. But when I started in 2008, there was very little. When I started teaching production, which I've been doing already for a long time, there was very little education in that particular space. So I have taught at NAB for 16 years, and all of my workshops there are, production related now. And I do a fair amount of stuff. You can see here on the screen. This is actually from a lynda.com / I guess LinkedIn Learning or / LinkedIn Learning, which is now Microsoft Learning. Who knows what it's going to be next. I've produced 3 courses for them. This is for a course called Advanced Cinematic Lighting. I also did another course called Cinematic Lighting. This is a lot of talking head stuff that I've done in the past. So I do travel a lot, and I do a lot of different types of productions in different spaces. So some of it's narrative, some of it's commercial. A lot of the work that I do is in the space that I think a lot of people are making their living, which is in the corporate world. And corporate doesn't mean boring. It doesn't always mean that you're doing stuff for a financial company. This is my vlogging for business course with lynda.com, and these are some stills from my lighting course. I have a website. You're supposed to have a YouTube channel now, so I do, and there's regular content that goes up on there. I will, for the people who are attending here live, I have cards, so I make myself available to you through email, and my phone number's on there actually, not my address. No, I'm just kidding. And I have a YouTube channel, and that's my YouTube channel. But what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about small to no crew production. How many people are doing video production on a regular basis right now? Okay. How many people have dabbled in it a little bit? Okay. And how many people come from the stills world and they're kind of living on both sides of it? Okay. So it's a kind of combination there. And I'm sure out there it's sort of similar. There's been a big trend, I would say, especially over the last 3 years, where a lot of people who may have been out there as freelancers or running their own independent video production companies have actually come in-house. And that's a huge trend because, as we heard in the beginning in our introductions, video production is everywhere now. And not only is video production everywhere, companies are basically required to produce video-based content on a regular basis. So before, they would go outside to a video production company, and maybe once a year, twice a year, every quarter, they would say, we have an initiative here and we want to have a marketing or a public relations message or a sales message that we either want to get out to the company internally, or we want to talk to an external group of people. And of course, we've been using the web for a long time as that medium, but now with places like YouTube and other places on the web and people's own websites and social media and Instagram and things like that, there's just more and more content being pushed out there. So what's happened is a lot of people who have had experience in video production, who have been producers or directors of photography and also editors, they have started to come in-house to companies to head up their departments and produce the video content. Because the companies realize, if we're now not going to a company outside every 6 months or every quarter, but we're asking them to create a video for us once a month or every 2 weeks or once a week or sometimes more than once a week, then it really becomes cost prohibitive for us to create all of this content, which people want, which we're seeing results from because we have an audience and it's growing. And we need to be able to do that in-house because it's a lot more cost effective. Now, the downside to that is generally what a company will do in the beginning is they'll hire one person and they'll expect that person to be every single person in that crew. They don't really understand what the different hats are that we wear in production and in post-production. So they'll say, well, you're going to be the director, and you're going to be the producer, and you're going to be the writer, and you're going to be the director of photography, and you're the sound recordist. And oh, by the way, you're going to also conduct the interviews, which is really the producer's job in most of the things. And oh, by the way, we like our shoots to be 2 camera shoots. And when we're done, we need the video up by tomorrow. So you also have to be the editor, you have to be the person who does color correction, you have to do sound mixing and all of that kind of stuff. But what really happens is there's either a very small, tiny handful of people in the world who can actually handle that completely, or they eventually say, we need to grow this department a little bit, and then that department grows to a department of 2 to 5 people. And now you have people who can wear multiple hats, but you can be a lot more efficient. And I always say that if you have 2 people in a crew that know what they're doing in terms of production, you can get at least 4 times as much done. It's not twice as much, because there's only so much that we can keep track of in production ourselves. But that said, there's a lot of times when we're asked to do everything by ourselves. So most of what I've been focusing on educationally in the last 1.5 to 2 years has been on small to no crew production. So when I say no crew production, it means it's just you. And then small crew is 2, 3, maybe if you're lucky, up to 5 people. And that's still a relatively small group of people. Think about a 2-camera shoot, and somebody will hopefully be able to concentrate on one camera, another person on another camera, another person on sound, another person to be the producer director, and then you've got to have, you know, somebody who can actually help with lighting and things like that. A 5-person crew isn't a big crew, but that's not what we usually get. We usually get 3 or less. So as somebody who's in production all the time, one of the things that I like to do is I like to seek out solutions that are going to help people who are in and forced to be in these smaller crew situations. Well, before I do that, I do want to talk a little bit about, as I said before, the future of production, because I think there's a bigger picture here and some things that we also need to understand from a technical standpoint. So this is where we sort of shift gears for a minute and I start to talk about what's happening with camera systems and things like that. And I do this because even though this is very important, and this is all based on sort of, you know, being efficient on a set and is all part of, especially lighting, learning your craft, you also have to understand how modern digital camera systems work so that you can think about the whole picture related to all of those components and how they all fit together, okay? Questions are allowed. Please ask them. Just raise your hand like you're in school or something like that, and I'm happy to answer them. So, current state of production. This is our, I'm not going to say gold standard, but a lot of the content that has been produced over the last few years has been going out to the world as what we call full HD, or high definition. 1920 by 1080, 16 by 9 aspect ratio. Most of the people in this room and a lot of the people watching out there have been watching screens for a long time. And even if they're not that old, they probably started to watch a screen over a certain age that was a 4:3 aspect ratio, standard definition, lower resolution. And we made a transition to this higher resolution eventually, and we have a different, more cinematic aspect ratio. And it was a very, very hard transition for us to make in production, because we were not only shifting in terms of much higher resolution, so there was a lot more detail in the image, which meant that we had to light differently, makeup had to be done differently, but we were also, from a mindset standpoint, unless you came from a cinematic standpoint or background, we were rethinking how we were composing an image, because a 4:3 aspect ratio is very different than the 16:9 aspect ratio. And a lot of people who were producing corporate videos and in standard video production environments, and a lot of people producing content for television, didn't think in these wider aspect ratios. They thought in these, these more square-ish aspect ratio. So it was a tough transition when we moved. Now what's happening, and it's a very real thing that's happening, is we're now moving to what we call UHD, which stands for ultra high definition. It's sometimes called quad full high definition. So quad full high definition. It's a much higher resolution, 3840 by 2160, and this is why it's called quad full high definition, because it's exactly 4 times high definition. So if you look at those there and we put all of those pixels together, we wind up with ultra high definition. And I call this 4K for the masses. And the reason I call it 4K for the masses is because every 4K television that you go and buy on the other side of those glass doors over there is this resolution, because this is the aspect ratio that we've been used to with high definition. It's still a 16:9 aspect ratio, which means that we don't have to learn how to change things compositionally. Yes, there's a lot more pixels, so we are now seeing even more potential detail in the image. But if we really think about it, that's what this is. It's more pixels, okay? It's the same aspect ratio with a lot more pixels inside of the image. And in terms of the way the industry is moving, it's moving pretty quickly towards that. Now there's another version of 4K, and this is called Digital Cinema Initiative 4K, DCI 4K. This is the type of 4K that's used for theatrical distribution. So if you're going to go see, I can't say it as a blanket statement, but generally, if a feature film is going to be shot for theatrical distribution, it will generally be in this resolution. Now, we know that when you go to a movie, we sometimes get these very wide aspect ratios, and we get different aspect ratios that are used. And if you're somebody like Wes Anderson, and you see Grand Budapest Hotel, that actually uses 3 different aspect ratios for different time periods inside of the movie. And the beautiful thing nowadays is that even though the projectors in most modern movie theaters are this resolution, and they support 4K in terms of their projection, they are also, because they're digital projectors, able to change the aspect ratios on the fly. So we can basically have different aspect ratios from that same projector. They're also capable of varying frame rates and a whole bunch of other stuff that we are not going to get into today, but they are very, very flexible in terms of what they're capable of. But this is sometimes what people will call true 4K, DCI, or Digital Cinema Initiative 4K. And you'll notice that it is a 17:9 aspect ratio. So it's a slightly wider aspect ratio than ultra high definition, which is that 16:9 that we all know and maybe love or maybe hate. I don't know how you feel about it. So that said, if we're moving towards 4K, why and when do you start to think about 4K? Because there's GoPro and other action cameras that already capture in 4K. There's already plenty of smartphones that capture in 4K. There are tablets that capture in 4K. And then, of course, as we start to go up the line into mirrorless and DSLR cameras and into higher-end digital cinema cameras, 4K capabilities, whether it's DCI 4K, ultra-high definition, or both, is being put into a lot of camera systems right now. But when do you start to think about 4K for your productions, for your clients, for the things that you're producing that you want to go out to the outside world? Well, when I started talking about this a few years ago, it was a very different conversation. It was, if you're going to start to create content and you only want that content to live for the next 2 or 3 years, then high definition is probably fine. But that's not the world we live in now. I used to say you have to determine what's your distribution medium. Does it support 4K, or will it in the very near future? And then how long is that content in your mind supposed to live? So if you had a short campaign and you were going to shoot a commercial, or I also give another example, which is let's say an admissions video for a college or university, that has a relatively short lifespan. When you go and shoot an admissions video, and I've happened to have done a bunch of them, when you put them out to the world, the faculty and staff and the student body changes over time. So the university inevitably, because new programs come in and they build new buildings and everything else, they want to do a new admissions building admissions building. They need to do that too. And I've shot those too. But they do these admissions videos because they want to attract the right type of student for their higher education, for their college or university. So those were the questions that we used to ask in terms of when are we going to go for 4K. So if life of content was short, fine, maybe we don't create it in 4K, we just go with high definition. But the thing is that today, and this is really important to understand, is people are watching content on smartphones and tablets and laptops. And what they're doing is they're moving from those devices into their living room to these larger screens. And they're just pushing the content to the screens. And I can tell you right now, go outside. We happen to be in the event space of B&H, which is directly across from where televisions are sold, that there are very few HD televisions on that floor now. And so UHD televisions are outselling HD televisions by a lot, because that's consumerism. We won't talk about that. That's what we got after World War II. Consumerism. It's a beautiful thing because we get a lot of things, and it's a horrible thing. But it's, it's what we live with. So all of those UHD televisions are starting to replace HD televisions in people's living rooms. And the resolutions are going up on laptops and even smaller screens that people are getting. So as content creators, this is when we actually have to sit up and say, okay, what happens if I produce my project that may only be viewed for the next 6 months or a year, and I do it in HD? Well, I have to consider the fact that somebody's going to watch that content on an ultra high definition television instead of an HD television. And I'll tell you what happens when you take something that's lower resolution and you play it on a screen that's higher resolution. It doesn't look as good. It scales up and it looks mushy and it doesn't look as crisp and clean. And so as content creators, we have to be very aware of the fact that this is the sea change. It's not about whether or not our industry is adopting 4K. That happened years ago. If you went to NAB 9 or 10 years ago, they were talking about not HD, 4K, and UHD. They were already talking about this resolution. And over the last few years, we've all basically started to adopt it as something. But now you really have to consider the fact that this higher resolution is what people are going to want in terms of their viewing experience. It's not me telling you that you need to go out and shoot 4K content. It's me telling you that there's more of those televisions being sold than any other type of television. So if you're creating your content in HD, it's not going to look as good because they're playing it on something that has 4 times the resolution. That makes sense to everybody? Kind of? Okay. You don't have to like it. It's just, I'm sorry. I'm never here to tell you have to like it. But the other part of this, and it's also important to understand, is that resolution doesn't equal quality of image. So the other thing that I do like to talk about with a lot of people is that we have these action cameras out there. We have the sensors that are sitting inside of our smartphones and our tablets. And they're teeny tiny sensors. If you've ever watched a video where they take apart the camera mechanism of what's sitting behind an iPhone or a Galaxy or any type of other smartphone or tablet-based device, iOS or Android-based, the camera is teeny tiny. And it's only so big. Now that can be a 4K camera, And it can be a really good camera in a drone or whatever it's going to be, or in a gimbal-based system. But the reality is that camera is only as good as sort of the whole system that's inside of there. So that's why resolution doesn't equal quality. So when you watch a television show and you see amazing 4K footage from a drone or from a GoPro camera that was shooting in 4K, I can guarantee you that they shot in ideal or near ideal conditions when they got that footage. It happened to be that perfect day, and the exposure was where it needed to be. And it's, you know, those cameras are tuned to be up on drones, or they're attached to the side of a truck, and it hopefully is a nice sunny blue sky day with a few wispy clouds, and you have kind of a nice image. As soon as you take that little action camera and you put it into a non-ideal production environment, it starts to break apart in terms of what the image is capable of doing. So there's a big difference there, but there are a lot of ingredients that make up what we consider the things that make a good quality image. One of them is lenses, and it's one of the few analog pieces that we have left in the whole equation. The quality of that glass and the way that they design the contrast in the lens, the sharpness of the lens, sort of how it renders color, how they coat the lens, they handle flare and all of these other characteristics which you may like or may not like depending on the lens that you buy. Lenses have a lot to do with the quality of the image. You can take a nice quality camera system and you can put a kit lens on it, and you will have a nice to mediocre looking image. And then you can take that same nice camera system and you can put an exceptional lens on it, and will actually change the quality of your image considerably, and it can actually change the image that you're getting out of the camera system. On the flip side of it, you can take a $100,000 camera system and you can put that same kit lens on it, and you will still have a mediocre picture that you're getting out of there. Then when you put that same great lens on that amazing camera, then there's other ingredients that make it even better in terms of image. But lenses definitely have a lot to do with and can contribute a lot to that. The camera system itself, that's a big part of it, sure. I mean, I talked about the GoPro camera, and we talk about getting into higher end digital cinema cameras, and there's things that are inside of there, like the recording formats. How much does it compress, or how little does it compress? And there's a lot of ingredients that come into that. We have the bit rate or data rate. Is it 100 megabits per second or 400 megabits per second? 400 megabits per second is better because you're allocating more data to each one of those seconds of images that are being captured, which means that you have a richer image, right? And then we also have things like 8-bit and 10-bit. What's the color depth that's inside of there? And then how many colors is it capturing, right? So we hear about that sometimes. So when we put all of those ingredients together, they can seemingly on paper, when you're not looking at the recording formats, you can look at a mirrorless camera system and you can look at a $20,000 digital cinema camera, and they both record the same color spaces in some cases, and they record the same amount of what we'll talk about in a minute, dynamic range, but they don't necessarily record as rich of an image because they don't both capture the same amount of colors. They don't record at the same data rates, right? They don't do all of that kind of stuff. So when you take that image into post-production and you start to try to process the image itself is not going to hold up as well. You're not going to be able to do as much with that image. So if you take a Sony mirrorless camera system, A7 series, great cameras under ideal conditions or even not so ideal conditions, you can get exceptional imagery out of those cameras. And you shoot with them a certain way with a big color space and lots of dynamic range, and then you do the same thing with an FS7 II, which is a higher end digital cinema camera. There's no comparison between the image, even though you're shooting with the same color spaces and you're shooting with in seemingly about the same amount of dynamic range. The FS2's image is so much richer, you can push and pull the image so much more because there's so much more data being captured by that camera as opposed to the mirrorless camera. So there's a lot of things that go into what allow us to get a great image. And then when we shoot in higher resolutions, we have to be able to monitor properly. So that means, obviously having a 4K display is better than having an HD display because you're matching the resolution of the monitoring device. And then lighting is always going to be part of it. Lighting is going to be one of the biggest parts of it because if you have a good camera with good recording formats, then it really boils down to craft at that point, right? That's what it really is going to come down to. It's how well can you assess the situation that you're in and produce what either is in the director's head or in your head as far as what you want to accomplish in terms of the look and feel of what you're trying to do. And most of the time that boils down to lighting. Doesn't hurt to have good lenses on the camera system when you do that, but it really does have a lot to do with how you light. And we have to light differently now for 4K than we did for not only standard definition, but to a certain degree for high definition. Because A, there's more resolution, and B, we're starting to see more things inside of the camera systems that we didn't see before. One of them is dynamic range. So now we can see a lot more information from blacks to whites than we did with camera systems in the past. That just means that the image that's being captured by the camera system is letting us see a lot more data. Now, this is, we're not Ansel Adams. But when Ansel Adams went in and shot on film and went into a darkroom, he very precisely thought about dynamic range and where things fell in terms of shadows, midtones, and highlights. And that's a lot of what he did was in the darkroom. When we talk about modern camera systems and we talk about dynamic range, we're talking about how many stops or steps of black to white is being captured by that camera. We can probably see about 21 stops, humans. That's kind of a retina kind of ability. And up until recently, most digital camera systems captured about 7 to 9 stops of dynamic range at best. And in the last few years, we've started to see that change from about 10 to 12 stops of dynamic range. Well, now a lot of our modern camera systems are starting to capture somewhere between 14 to 16 stops of dynamic range. And I can almost guarantee you that within 12 months, we'll probably see a camera system that hits somewhere in the 18 stops of dynamic range. So we're now starting to see, this is not our displays. These things are not capable of showing us 15 stops of dynamic range yet, but the cameras themselves are capable of capturing enormous amounts of dynamic range in our image. And when I talk about dynamic range, I'm only talking black to white values, okay? Shadows, basically, or pure black into the shadows, all the way up into our highlights. And what that means is that the cameras are now capable, as long as they have good recording formats, they're not recording at low data rates. Sorry, I hit my mic there. If you heard that in the interweb world, I hit it with just acknowledging. I know it happened, all right? So when we're recording with these camera systems now, we're able to capture nuance. And this is one of the things that cinematographers have sort of had in their palette for a long time with film and high-end cinema cameras. And the ability to process that and be able to see into the shadows and to see detail into the highlights. So this is a really exciting time for us because we're now starting to see those capabilities in camera systems that cost somewhere around the $6,000 to $10,000 range. And this was not even possible even 3 years ago without spending $40,000 to $60,000 in the camera system. So it's a pretty amazing thing that we're starting to see this ingredient being added to our toolkit. And what it means is when we're in small production and we show up in a room that's this size and there's a window over there and you have no choice but to shoot with that window in the background of somebody and there's natural light coming in, that you can take a relatively small light like these 1x1 flex lights or 2x2 flex lights, and you can bring that in and you can balance the difference between your subject matter and the background because the camera is capturing a much wider dynamic range. That's part of the image that's being captured. And that's a beautiful thing because we need that because we're dealing with such small crew production. When you have a larger crew, you can take somebody and say, okay, I need you to take a roll of ND, neutral density, and I need you to go and cut it and put it up against those windows so that we can cut how much light is coming in but not change the color temperature. And now I don't have to bring in as large of a light, but that's 1 or 2 crew members that are doing that for 45 minutes to an hour and a half to make sure that it's cut properly, and that it's put up on the windows properly and everything else. Well, now if my camera is capable of capturing enough dynamic range, I don't have to worry about that as much. It doesn't mean that you don't need to meter properly. It doesn't mean that you don't need to expose properly. You absolutely need to do those things. But there's more leeway, there's more flexibility in the image that's being captured than there was in prior camera systems that were available to us. So that's an exciting thing in terms of a development in production. Then that's why people record log or raw, because a log image is very flat, right? And we're taking advantage of or trying to get as much dynamic range as we can out of the sensor that's in that particular camera system. And then raw is another way of attacking that. It's a more complicated way in the sense, but in the end, raw is not a video signal, so at some point it has to be turned into a video signal, and when it gets turned into a video signal, it basically becomes log anyway. You're still got that curve, so that's another seminar. We won't get into that today. Are there any questions about this so far that you want to ask? I'm happy for questions. And I'll repeat your question so that, is there anything? Does this make sense to everybody? Okay. I know we're not into this equipment yet, but this is important stuff. I don't know if anybody else is going to talk to you about it, so I'm going to talk to you about it. That's all I got to say. It's a little bit of soapbox, but not really. I'm trying to prepare you guys. So this is actually log footage. This is shot on C300 Mark II. This is a documentary short project that I did. It was part of a series that I produced for Canon that was focused on the C300 Mark II, and it featured a very good friend of mine, Matt Porwall, who's a cinematographer. If you ever heard of a movie called Cartel Land, he was a cinematographer for that, and he's working on some other really interesting things. And we got this opportunity to go to Brooklyn Sunset Park, and we shot a documentary short on a place which is called Brooklyn Phono, which is a record pressing plant. And we did it purposely. I'd love to play it for you at some point, but we did it purposely. It's up on my website. I did it purposely together, where it wasn't about the sort of, vinyl is coming back. That ship has sailed already. It was really about two people, a husband and a wife, who ran this record pressing plant, and sort of the quirkiness, and we did about a 5-minute doc. And it became the basis of this educational series. But if you look behind her shoulder, Fern's left shoulder, you'll see outside of that window, we can see that there's detail there. And this monitor is, if we're lucky, this NEC monitor probably can show us 8 or 9 stops of dynamic range. So if we were looking at a monitor that could show us 15 stops of dynamic range, can you imagine how much even more information we'd be seeing from the inherent image? This is a limitation of the screen, and we can still see detail outside of that window. And we didn't use a huge light, and we actually used this thing called a book light where we bounce and diffuse. I have one here. And we just pushed a light source into that, and it wasn't a huge light source. And we were able to balance this image very, very nicely, and then it was brought into post-production, and it was color graded. But being able to do this with modern camera systems is great. We also did it here, where we obviously have less dynamic range in the highlights, but you can see there's, except for what he's wearing, because he's obviously wearing all white, but we can see that there's a lot of information there that we can see into the shadows. And again, there's a limitation here for the screen that we're looking at, because it's not even capable of showing us close to the dynamic range of what the camera is actually capable of capturing. But you can see that we can access a lot of information there. And then the second part of it, which is the part that really nobody's talking about, is the color space, which is how we're capturing color in the camera. So we just talked about black to white, right? You guys, everybody's gotten that? Okay, so if we look over on the left-hand side, there's this big area, the largest part that you see there, that's basically the color spectrum that we can see as human beings, okay? The smaller triangle inside of there is called Rec 709, and this is the target color space for content that we create right now. So anytime we film something, even if we capture it in a bigger color space, when we target it to Rec 709, because virtually every screen that's out there that is an HD screen conforms to this color space. It's a reduced color space. Is anybody, who's the stills photography in here as well? So Rec 709 is very comparable to sRGB in terms of actual color space. So it's about the same amount of color space as sRGB. And D65 is just our white point for calibration, so that's why you see that. And we go to the middle one, and we see DCI. That's a DCI word again, or acronym, which stands for Digital Cinema Initiative, P3. This is actually the target color space for theatrical distribution. So when you go see a movie, and somebody has to color grade the movie, they don't target it to Rec 709, which is for all our tablets and our laptops and our televisions in our home. they target it to this larger color space called DCI P3. And one of the things that you'll notice whenever you see these triangles expanding is they always push towards the greens, because we're very sensitive as human beings to green, and that's that logical place to expand in terms of color space. And then you'll see that's about 40, almost 46% of our visible spectrum that we can see as human beings. And then over on the right-hand side, we'll see the ginormaloid triangle. This is Rec 2020. This is going to be effectively our target color space for 4K in the future. The displays are going to take a while to catch up to being able to show us that color spectrum. But right now, modern digital cameras are actually capable of capturing generally larger than this actual color space over here, which is about 76% of our visible spectrum. So if I'm on a C300 Mark II, an FS Mark II, if I'm on an Arri Alexa, if I'm on a Ursa Mini Pro, I'm on the new EVA 1 that's going to come out from Panasonic, I'm on a C200, whatever that camera system is, all of those camera systems, the VeriCam, they're all capable of capturing a larger color space than generally Rec 2020. And so that means that if we want, as creators, we can capture huge dynamic range, lots of information from blacks to whites. We can also capture very large color space. And then what we can do in post-production is we target these different color spaces. We oftentimes, if we're not colorists, do it using LUTs or lookup tables as a starting point. But it's basically a way for us to take this image and put it into a manageable space that targets wherever that's going to be distributed. So as content creators, what we need to be thinking about is not only resolution, we also need to be thinking about how we capture that resolution with enough color space and enough dynamic range so that we create essentially digital masters that give us the ability as we go forward in the future to push that content to other places. Because if we want to do a theatrical, great, most of us are not going to do that. But eventually, all of those televisions in a couple of years or 3 years that are sitting over there in B&H on that floor, they are going to be capable of Rec 2020. They're not fully right now. Don't let anybody tell you they are. But they are capable of much better color space. P3 over there is becoming something that we're seeing in a lot of monitors. In fact, the new iPhone 7, it's not so new anymore, is capable of P3 color space, and also the new MacBook Pros. So I think we'll see displays. And that's also part of the whole, we won't go there. That's another conversation. And that, again, is your whole visible spectrum right there. And those are the three triangles together so you can see what they look like and the comparison of Rec 709, P3, and 2020. Does that make sense, everybody? Lots of stuff to think about, important, and there it is again, sort of just to reiterate what it is. Okay, good. So when we combine high dynamic range, some people will call HDR everything. It's color, frame rates, and everything else. But to me, the base of what high dynamic range is dynamic range. It's number of steps or stops from black to white. And we combine that with wide color gamut, which means big color spaces. These are the ingredients in terms of, along with 4K and above resolutions, what we're thinking about in terms of future production, in terms of camera systems. Yes. So that's a great, yeah. So when we're thinking about high dynamic range, we're thinking about capturing more steps or stops of dynamic range so that we can, when we target wherever our places are, we can say, okay, I want more detail in the shadows here, I want a little more detail in the highlights. There's only so much range you have. And if you're looking at it on a Rec 709 monitor, guess what? As long as you can see it on the Rec 709 monitor, you'll know where you can slide it left and right. It gives you that ability. And the color is very, very similar in terms of concept. I mean, if we go back to that slide, just so that we can take a look at it, if I go in the right direction, if you capture your image with a wide color gamut, like Rec 2020 over there on the right-hand side, but you know your target space is going to be Rec 709 and maybe also P3 in the future, then you know that you have the colors to work with in order to put them where you want them to be. Now, the downside for a lot of people is not understanding the recording formats of their camera systems. So a lot of cameras that are on the market that cost, there's some of them that cost under $1,000, will actually let you capture in a huge wide color gamut and quite a lot of dynamic range. And generally, it's not the dynamic range that's the problem, but it's part of it. And let's say your camera captures 4K at 100 megabits per second. And that could sound like a really high number. But let's just say that for comparison, if you look at a sort of modern digital cinema camera that might cost $7,500 to $15,000, that it would capture that same color gamut and that same dynamic range at 4 times that data rate, at 400 megabits per second. There's a big difference between what you can do with the image at 100 megabits per second and what you can do at 400 megabits per second. Again, there's other ingredients, which I mentioned before, which is bit depth, right? So you've got 10-bit versus 8-bit. Obviously, 10-bit is better than 8-bit. And you've got how many colors the camera is capturing. But if your data rate is low, it can only allocate so much data to each one of those bits and to those colors and to that dynamic range. So the higher the data rate that your camera is capturing, in theory, along with more colors and a better bit depth, then the more you can do with your image. So it's not a one-trick pony. You don't just get wide color gamut and say, Holy Grail. And you don't just get dynamic range and say, Holy Grail. And you definitely don't get it if you're recording at low data rates with a lot of compression and not a lot of color information and those types of things. So your analogy is absolutely right. It's being able to slide and mold and put things where they need to be, but it's also understanding that there's other ingredients in the camera system, which is why I'm talking about all of these things, because there's a huge frustration for people in production. They're like, okay, I got the right equipment, and I got, in terms of my grip, and I got the right lights, and I got all the right modifiers, and then they didn't expose their image properly. They didn't understand the limitations or the possibilities of their camera system. And it's every camera now. I mean, I got to tell you that all this is a computer, right? It's got a real lens in front of it. So this is analog, and then there's a sensor block in here, and everything from there on is computer. I mean, that's what it is. That's what you got. And so you have to understand your computer system. And there's an Arri Alexa is very different than a Canon C300 Mark II, which is also very different than an FS7 Mark II, which is different from an Ursa Mini Pro. They're all essentially the same type of capturing device, but they all have a different operating system, and they all have a different formula in terms of their color science and how they capture the image and all those things. So all of these things are things not necessarily for people to be overwhelmed about. It's just to have an understanding that these are the ingredients that we're dealing with. And then what we can do is we can take that image and we can decide what we want to do with it in terms of where we want to take it. Sure, the windows are a little more blown out right now, but I can still see some detail there, and I can adjust this image and I can lose some of the shadow detail, but I have that flexibility in terms of what I can do with those images. So these are all really important decisions that you have to make. I'm a better director of photography now, not just because I continue to work at getting better at lighting, and I constantly work on it because I never feel like I'm ever getting anywhere. But I am getting better, but it's just sort of like it's a never-ending learning process. But I'm a better director of photography also because I understand how cameras work. And so because I understand how these computer brains work and I learned that camera system, I know what I can and can't get out of the camera system. And that adjusts the way that I light or expose my image or I do things in production. So, and we make mistakes. And then we get a camera and we're excited to use it and we don't spend enough time with it. Saying it's happened to me. And then you learn from those mistakes and you start to learn what that camera system is. That's why it's always a good idea, if you can, to rent a camera for a week before production and take it out and do test shoots, because you can start to find out how it produces images and how much you can do with the image in post-production. I can completely overexpose somebody's face on certain digital camera systems and have this side of the face underexposed, and I can balance them because those cameras have latitude. They have the ability not only for dynamic range, but how far I can push and pull from where the original image was. I can have another camera that in theory has as much dynamic range, but it doesn't have that magic sauce that other digital camera system Alexa has, and you can't, and it's just the ability to be able to do that. Now, an Arri Alexa is not as good in low light as some of the other digital cinema cameras, but it just has this amazing ability to be able to handle highlights and what's happening in the shadows and to balance an image that's very hard to do with some other camera systems. They're catching up, and it's definitely getting better, but there are certain ingredients there. And remember that the Arri Alexa is not a 4K camera, a true 4K camera. You can upscale it to 4K, and it's done all the time, and it looks amazing. But it just shows you that it's the other ingredients that have a big part in terms of what gives you an image. Yes?
Do you work with all the systems, all the cameras, or do you particularly work with one camera that you like?
Yes.
Not to endorse a brand.
Yeah, no, the question is, do I work with all the camera systems, or do I work with one particular brand that I like? The answer is actually the former. I work with all different types of camera systems. I've shot on, I just did a promo for Rode microphones that we shot in LA, and that was shot on an Alexa Mini as the A camera, and we actually used the C300 Mark II as the B camera. Partially because it was the camera that was available, and partially because I wanted to see what we could do with it as a B camera and see how well it would cut with the Alexa Mini. They are very different, but they definitely were capable in the right hands in post-production to get to the place where they were able to match the two camera systems. I've shot a lot of content on the original FS7. I would say that in the last year and a half that I've shot more content on the C300 Mark II and the FS7 than any other cameras. I generally don't shoot on micro four thirds cameras. I have done some GH4 production, but I don't generally do a lot. I've shot a fair amount on the A7 series from Sony, so mirrorless cameras. And again, that's an understanding of that lower data rate and sort of where you can and can't push the image. And that's where I really learned that experience of shooting on a camera like an A7S Mark II and an FS7, and seeing the difference between the two cameras shooting in theoretically the same color gamut and the same, well, it's not the same dynamic range, it's different, but still a decent dynamic range, and knowing that there's a very big difference between what I can and can't do between those two camera systems. I don't play favorites. I've shot on the Ursa Mini Pro a little bit. I think it's finding the right camera system for the types of projects that you're doing. Historically, Sony has done high speed better, and a lot of people argue that Canon has better color science. And part of it's personal preference, and part of it is how much can you do with the image in post-production, which is, of course, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. So enough of that mumbo jumbo. So any other questions on that? Because we're going somewhere else. You guys all right? Okay. Yes, I'm ready.
I've moved to the GH5 system.
Yep.
And I'm shooting 150 right now.
Yep.
The next firmware update is going to promise 400.
Yep.
Why didn't they just put out the camera with the capability of 400 to begin with? Because what's changing as far as the hardware is concerned that gives that 400 megabit?
So we're talking specifically about the GH5. We're talking about the fact that it has 150 megabits per second, basically data rate, bit rate right now for recording. I'm just repeating what you're saying a little bit for the web, because you don't have a mic, so I'm letting them know what's going on out there. And they're going to release in a future firmware update the ability for the camera to actually record at 400 megabits per second. Why didn't they release it that way in the beginning, and what are they doing to the camera, or what's the deal with that? It's a trend. I mean, one of the things that you have to understand right now is that camera companies are trying to put out camera systems, and they're trying to become the next big camera, or or continue their sort of winning streak on what they had before. And the GH4 was a wildly popular camera and extremely successful. And it's really the camera system in a lot of ways that really kept Panasonic in the space, even though it's considered a consumer-ish based product. When the AF100 came out, which is a micro four thirds sort of camera in a not exactly same format as this, but a smaller digital cinema camera, Panasonic was the first camera company to come out with sort of this large sensor, smaller digital cinema camera that was cost effective. They came out with a version 2 of it, but then it sort of petered. And so the GH4 came out, and that was sort of their thing. And then they spent a lot of time developing the VariCam system. So the VariCam LT, and now they've just announced, and they'll be coming out in the fall with the EVA1, which is going to be a super 35mm sensor camera system with an EF mount, so it'll take Canon lenses and Canon compatible lenses natively for companies like Zeiss and things like that. And it's going to be a robust camera system, 5.7K, nice high data rate, the 400 megabits per second. So there's a lot of R&D that goes into this stuff, but there's also when is the camera ready to release without there being problems with it. So there's a track record here where, you know, cameras that are in smaller camera bodies have had higher data rates or higher resolutions, and they've overheated and things like that. So I would guess, though I don't work for Panasonic and I don't have any inside information, a lot of this just has to do with roadmap. They're ready to release the camera with those features on day one, and they needed more time to make sure that everything, they knew it was capable, but they really had to tune the firmware to make sure that when they released it, fingers crossed, that there aren't a lot of problems with that 400 megabits per second codec, because that's going to work the processors harder, and that in sense, I mean, you work a processor harder, it generates more heat. That's what happens. So I'm no engineer, but that much I'm pretty sure of, I think. So that's our best answer, you know, I can give you. It's not a good answer, but it's my answer. So the reality of today's production, it sucks. That's the reality. It doesn't suck. It's very exciting, actually. It's small to no crews, and we, you know, that's really the reality. And we're not going to change. That's not going to happen. We're not all of a sudden like somebody's going to at some company say, you know what, I saw you guys on that last production, and you looked like you were struggling, and we're just going to give you a budget for like an extra 2 or 3 people next time. You know, what else do you need? When have we ever heard those words? What else do you need? Question mark. Never. So the expectation is there's so much good looking content on the web now. Not all of it's good storytelling, but there's so much good looking content that there's an expectation of very high production value. And the expectation also is coupled with no crew. Like me and Ryan, this is a crew. Like, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've spent an entire day, and then the other person on the crew has spent an entire day in 2 different locations, and we have, you know, talked out the project, and we packed up our bags the way we have. I have a rolling cart over there, and we're basically traveling with the type of kit that I would normally travel with, and we show up, and it's me and one other person, you know, and I'm doing an interview with a satellite truck on Prince and Broadway with Ariana Huffington, but it's 2 people. And we're responsible for everything. That's it, except for the guy in the satellite truck. You know, and that's a big responsibility. He's got to come in and do the cabling and handle the transmission of the production. But it's 2 people. That's it. And so, as I said earlier on, what I've been working hard to do is working hard to get the kit smaller. Fortunately, we've seen tremendous advances in lighting over the last few years, which have helped tremendously in that regard. And the missing piece of the puzzle, and Ryan knows this because I've known him for a while now, is all of the support stuff. It's all the grip and the stands and everything else. I love C-stands. I think they're fantastic. And I will not replace C-stands in certain situations because there's certain things that I can rig in certain ways that we can do things with C-stands in terms of the height that they can get to with certain ones, and you know, just sort of the riggability of what we can do with a you know, C or Sentry stand. And you know, they're ubiquitous to what we do in production. They're strong and they're relatively indestructible, but they are a real pain to travel with, whether it's locally or getting on an airplane. They almost always have to be bagged because of the way they have very good weight distribution, but it's still sort of the design of how they are with their 3 legs, and it's a different size for each leg, that you really always find yourself putting a sandbag or something to bag that to hold it down. And that's really where I got excited about Triad-Orbit, because I find myself in these situations where we're showing up and we are going to, you know, to the 6th floor of a building and setting up an interview, and we have to get it set up in half an hour to an hour, and we have to shoot something, and we need relatively, you know, decent lights, which are not always, they're not heavy, but they need to have a real light stand. This is a 1x2 flexible light that's made by Westcott. It's a daylight light. We have other ones that are bicolor, and I need to be able to put this on a stand, and I need to feel secure about where that light is. I need a light that has good output, but I also need to be able to believe in what the system is that I'm putting those instruments on when I'm actually putting stuff together. I also need to do things like set up microphones, because when we're a small crew, we need to conduct the interview. We need to have a microphone coming off of a boom arm. We need to set that. We're not going to have a boom operator who's doing it, right? So we might put a lavalier on, but we're almost always going to boom a mic in that situation. And then we want to also be able to do things like put lights in different places, but not necessarily use stands for those things. So I need little pieces of grip. And I've been building, and this goes back to the talking to Ryan over time. He's seen me put stuff out on the floor and show him things. And I've taken various components from lots of different companies, and I've created my own little grip systems. None of them are perfect. None of them really satisfy what I'm trying to accomplish completely, but they're doing the job that I need them to do. I can clamp something to anything, and I can get a baby pin off of it, and I can put a small little LED light off of it and use that as a kicker, or a hair light, or a little edge, or something like that. But it's all pieces from different places, and so that's really frustrating. And it also makes you have to think too much when you're on a set, because you're trying to say, okay, where's that piece in that bag, and then I need that piece to go into that piece. And I'd rather just have a system that was more universal, and that's where the whole I/O system, this Triad-Orbit, in-out system, really kind of, this was the epiphany, by the way. This is what we talked about in the beginning. If you weren't watching the webinar in the beginning, we had this fine gentleman come over here and lift up this stand, which weighs about the same amount as a C-stand. And so we've got this bottom-weighted stand, which has tremendous flexibility in terms of being able to be small and compact, but have that stability that we get usually out of a C-stand. So I call this a C-stand alternative. And I'm using it as a C-stand alternative. And then we have this ability to be able to take all of these different connectors with all of these different abilities, some of them with ball mounts, some of them with just, quarter 20 or a baby pin, and I can just go ahead and pop that into place, and then there it is, and it's a baby pin, and then I will need to have a 3/8 with a ball mount, and I can just attach that, and I can just quickly release it. And then all of these pieces go together just the way I love to build things. So I can say I want a clamp here, and I want to go ahead and I want to attach that here to a ball mount. So now I have a clamp that can go anywhere, and now I have a 3/8. Can I change this? Yes, I can. I can unscrew this, and I can change that from a 3/8 to a quarter 20. So now I have a system where I can go and I can rig pretty much any way I want. I can do it off of stands. I can do it off of anything that I want. I can clamp it to the side of a table or wherever I want, onto a desk, the back of a chair. And so I have all of this flexibility. So this is what's really exciting to me. I work with companies that I seek out a different type of product. Sometimes it's finding best in class, and sometimes it's about an evolution of a product category. The reason that I started a relationship with Westcott wasn't actually because of this flex light right here, which I love and I use all the time. It packs flat. It's a bicolor light that has tremendous light output, which we're going to use in a couple of minutes with some of these lighting setups. The reason I went to Westcott is because I was using their old Scrim Jim system, which was a frame-based system where you could build and produce different frames. And I wanted to create something that was, I didn't design it. They were already developing what they call Scrim Jim Cine. But I wanted to design and develop some products that were for small crews, that allowed them to travel effectively and do things that normally would be done with rigid frame solutions. So this is called a DP kit. Each one of these tubes, and there's 8 of them, break down to 22 inches. So you've got 8 22-inch tubes, and then with straight connectors and corner connectors, you can build a 4-foot by 4-foot frame. And this 4-foot by 4-foot frame can be used to bounce light. We have silver here and we have white here. There's a diffuser that I have in a pack sitting somewhere on the table, so I can actually push light through it. And then if you know what a floppy is, or a floppy cutter, I can actually put a 4x4 on here, which is somewhere on the floor. Doesn't really matter where it is. It's there. And it goes onto this frame, and you open it up, and it becomes a 4-foot by 8-foot piece of black fabric, duvetine, 12-ounce duvetine, that you can use to either flag or use as negative fill, inside or outside. This is a 1-inch tube solution, and it has 3/8 taps on each one of the tubes. And the tubes come in different sizes, so you can build different things. So this DP kit is a kit that I designed specifically to be able to do small crew production, where I can go anywhere. The bag rolls up, and you can put it over your shoulder. And you can have this entire frame with all 3 of those fabrics, a floppy cutter, silver white, and a one-stop diffusion inside of one little kit with a clamp, right? And use it with this system over here. So that's one thing, and we're going to use that in a couple of minutes for some things. And then how do you take that system and do things on a slightly larger scale but still make it so that it can be used for small crew production? Well, that's the other kit that I designed using Scrim Jim Cine, and that's this right here, and this is called a book light. So this is a 4x6. It's 2 frames that go together. There's something called a swing hinge there, so it actually folds into itself, so you can have it go in either direction. And it comes with different fabrics. One of the fabrics that it comes with is unbleached muslin, which kind of warms up light and is really beautiful for bouncing light off of. And then it also has duvetine or black on the other side. It comes with a half grid cloth, which is a beautiful type of diffusion. It also comes with a 3/4 stop if you have lights that aren't as powerful and you still want to diffuse the light a little bit. And it also comes with that silver and white that I showed you on the DP kit. These frames also break apart. So what I can do is I can take things like this T3 stand with that clamp that I showed you here, which is called this is the IOC for the clamp. And I can take this and I can go ahead and take this off of these stands with a ball mount, and we can go ahead and rig it, and I can have 2 4x6 frames separately because it comes with all the corner connectors and everything as well. So I can separate them, bounce off of one, and then block light with the other, flag light. Or I could push light through one of them, and I could bounce light off of another one. So you can use them in combination with the other. So it's a very modular type of system, and it's built out of 34-inch tubes and 22-inch tubes. We actually just redesigned this. It had longer tubes before, so that it actually is also very, very compact. It'll actually now fit into this Triad-Orbit case over here if we wanted to, which is also sold separately. I've been using that case for how long? 2.5 years or something like that. So this is also, this is all part of the idea of, this takes about 5 to 10 minutes to set up, tops, once you lay everything out, tops. And this becomes an amazing light modifier for when you're shooting things. Because all I have to do now is I bounce light off of here, and then the light comes in through here, and this just becomes a huge soft source that you can use for lighting your projects. You can use them independently if you want, but it becomes a really fantastic tool for being able to do small crew production. It's fantastic for side lighting. So you come in with the book light right on somebody's side, and then on the other side, off of a T3 stand with a clamp, we can go ahead and we can fill with a big source like this. So side light, and then to here, that's a beautiful way to light things. We'll do something similar to that with another light in a minute. I think what we'll do is we'll push the, I'm going to do a little switch, Ryan, and I'm going to get this image to come up over here now.
Okay. Is this where talent is? Right there?
Yeah, I think so. So let's talk about this. Let's talk it out. Yeah, let's do a first setup. We're going to make this up as we go along here. It's the best way to do it. So, yeah. Of course, now the screen's going to be in the wrong place, but that's okay. Well, we could go in this direction, I guess. Yeah, you know what we'll do? Because then everybody can sort of see stuff being built in this direction. Should we do it that way? I feel sort of good about it. I might change my mind in a minute. So Ryan, I think what we're going to do is we'll first take a T3 and we're going to use it. I guess we're going to have to do like probably a ball mount.
Okay.
So what are the two sizes that we have? We have the OA.
OA is the larger ball.
Yep.
M2 is the smaller ball.
And then the smaller. I
Which
think we
is
can
on
use
here.
either for what we're going to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to go off of a T3 stand here, and I'll start to move some stuff around, and maybe we'll go in this direction.
Okay.
I might make this could be a mistake, but you know, it's always.
You want to set up that bounce we did?
Yeah, I think that's what. So the first thing we'll do is we'll open this up,
Okay.
and then we'll set up a background here.
Okay.
So this is kind of like you know, if we needed to just have a neutral gray background for something, this is just a standard. And this is just a tip for everybody. If you're going to bring a background in and you want to put color on it, a lot of people will use white. Now, if you want to go with a white cyc look and you want to evenly cross key it and everything, you can do that. But if you want color to read on the background light, the best thing you can do is actually use a neutral gray color. Okay, this happens to be a stormy gray, but if you just use a neutral gray color, gray will take color. White will reflect color, and black will absorb color. So do yourself a favor and use neutral gray, and life will become a lot easier. So I think what we're going to do, we can do this together, is we're going to get this stand here. We'll see if this all works out.
Just to hold that up?
Yeah, just to hold that up. And we're going to get a, do you want to do an OA, or what do you think? It doesn't need to be heavy. We can even go with the mini one, the smaller.
But we want the clamp, right?
We want the clamp.
So we're going to have to reverse the clamp.
Yep.
What
So
we
let's
have
see.
is, again, everything is based on a female in, male, everything connects together. This is a reverse. Because I want to put this clamp on the other end of the stand, I'm going to put that there. Now I can put that there. And then now we can create a clamp. But we don't have the adjustment we need.
Right.
So this is where I'll have to use an OA. OA is our larger format ball joint. Drops in, and now look what I've got. I've got all that rotation for a clamp. So now we can set this up.
Yeah. And it's all a
and
rector
hold
set,
that in place.
right? So you can basically just, and all of these little parts are modular parts. You can go in, you can just say, I need one of these, and you add that to your kit, and then that allows you to build out a different way. So we're not going to use, I'm just going to grab anything that I might need here. We're going to actually set this all the way on the back wall.
Okay.
So you're going to have to rotate, just grab the middle of that,
Okay.
and it'll just be our background.
Okay.
Okay, and then I'm just going to get this stuff out of the way. We're not going to use that book light right now, so you can cover that up.
Remember, we're a small crew. We don't have that many stands. So.
I do. I'm thinking it out, my friend. Oh, that's going to be great. So, so I think here, let me just, I can see the front here. So we're going to just move that over a little bit. Boom, and then we'll tighten that down. That's great. Okay. So that'll just sit up against the back wall. I'm going to go ahead and switch my cabling here. Let me switch behind you, and then we'll do this. Yeah, teaching and doing production is not the same, is it? Here we go. And good.
I'm good. Okay.
That's going to go back there. There's a remote. I'm going in. Where is it? I lost it. I got it. I got it. I'm excited. Here we go. I think it's HDMI 1. Let's see what
Ryan,
happens.
while he's doing that, is your hex attachment system just a detented ball capture?
Let me show you.
It just slides in easy. It looks like it's
Yeah.
catching on something.
There's two versions. If it's a microphone or something of that nature, we don't even need the hex or the groove. This will not come out. The steel ball joint is biting into the brass. It will not come out. For anything that's hanging, that's larger format, we've put a safety groove on there. The balls rest right there. This is just like a drill auger sort of approach. Drops in, the balls rest below there. But if that happened to slip, then it catches the joint and it won't come out. I mean, it's it's pretty foolproof. So I'm going to pass some of these around so you guys can just click them together and just start feeling the positivity of this connection.
Yeah,
And by the way, this television monitor is on that same T3 stand
oh yeah,
with
rotate.
wheels on it,
Yep.
with that same ball joint, with this R-Class D-VESA mount. So the versatility of these stands is they can be anything they need to be at any time. And when he changes his mind as the director and I'm the grip and say, oh, what am I going to do? Well, I can still grab a T3 stand and I can still grab the same tools that once you start getting into Triad-Orbit, once you have this, it can connect to that, and then this can connect to that. And then all of a sudden, you've just got this massive palette of toys for professionals that you can use.
Yeah, in fact, let's take this.
Roll it out there.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
going to unplug it.
Yep.
And we may use the stand for a different purpose. We may use it for this. We'll have to decide on that.
Okay.
But then that way you can show everybody that stand.
So that same stand, by the way, the T3 stand is already threaded for wheels. They're solid steel legs. So you can buy it as a T3C that comes with the wheels. They go in literally a minute. You just lock the wheel, spin it in, spin it out, whichever way you'd like to do it. They're super smooth. And as I showed you earlier, because these stands have air-loaded shafts, if I did happen to drop this television, it'll go slow and solid. And the air is also adjustable, so you can make it as tight or as loose as you want. So again, with that, he says set up a TV. I can do that fast. Pull the TV out of the monitor,
Yep.
drop in my OA joint, drop it onto the stand, position it, and it's ready.
And we're using these for professional monitors. I mean, we're putting, up to 17 to 24-inch, production monitors onto this thing. It's weighted, it's wheeled, the wheels lock, and also fantastic, especially when you're doing things that are studio or location-based where you're inside. We'll set, light like this up on wheels, and then we can just move our key light around very, very quickly. So it does make for much faster production. We're almost always going to have a monitor on wheels because we always want to get that over to and change where the video village is for the client, for them to be able to see image. But I really do love the T3s with the wheels because we'll put lights on them. And then if we've got 2 or 3 lights, sorry about the mic there. That was again for you people in the world. If we want to just take those 2 or 3 lights and we want to move them quickly around a space, then we can do that. And I can tell you from experience, back in December, I DP'd these little commercials for an electronics company. Small company now, I guess in some ways, is Vivitar, which is kind of funny because it's a sort of a regenerated brand. And they wanted to produce a whole bunch of content for a trade show. And CES actually, and so these were actual commercial spots for their electronics products that would primarily be pushed to the web and for social media and things like that. So we actually shot 4 commercials in 2 days in 2 different locations, and we had to move fast. And having kit like this allows that type of situation to happen. And we had a slightly larger crew there. I mean, we were, there was a production designer and there was things like that, but we had to move very quickly. Our core crew was basically 3 or 4 guys, and we were moving very quickly. So good. So monitor is great to have here. We may use it for a different purpose only because we're pushing to a monitor over
Sure.
here.
Yeah.
I think what we're going to do is I'd actually like to show people something that we had downstairs, and I show a lot of people from a lighting standpoint, which is a one-stand solution. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of set up what we would use for sort of more typical Rembrandt-style lighting. We're really pushing, this T3 system when we do this, and I'm really excited that we're able to do it in terms of what we're capable of. So we're actually going to take, I think we're going to take this right here.
You want to put that on wheels?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll bag it, I guess. I mean, we might need to, depending on
may
where
not
we are.
even need to
let's
bag
just
it.
see what that is. And then I'm just going to go ahead and just do one thing very quickly. while that starts to come together. Boom, there, keeps it clean.
So we
Okay.
need two on one stand.
Okay.
This is O2X.
Yep.
O2X is that same OA ball joint I showed you guys, but because it's got two ball joints on one stand, what I can do with this is take an arm off, tilt it this way, because I'm anticipating what he's already wants me to do. And can you set that light back up? I'm not as Westcott knowledgeable as you are. You tore it apart.
I'm in.
And you lost me.
I did that on purpose. So this is, so let's just talk about this, and then Ryan's going to break this down.
Because it's cool, yeah.
Yeah, so we've basically got two core pieces here. We've got the OA, which is the same ball mount that we were using before, right? So that's the one that we're actually using here with some connectors with the clamp. And then that's being attached to what's called the M2, which is this smaller version of the ball clamp. They actually both have about the same rating in terms of the weight that they can take. So we can easily put about 4 pounds on here, which for any of these little LED lights is not a problem. And then what I'm going to do, and I'll take it apart here so you guys can see what we're doing from an attachment standpoint. The way the Flex 1x1 lights are designed is they have little grooves on the corners here. So we're taking this, which is called an X-frame, and I'm basically just putting that into each one of these little grooves in the corner. So it's just creating tension, and then I'm just going to do that. And so this is essentially going to become our key light. It's not actually. That 1x1 is going to become our key light. But we're going to actually go ahead and attach this, and then you can see here, now we have the ability to position this any way we want, okay? But the beautiful thing to me is that we have the I/O connector here. We have that hex connector, which of course can go into either side here of the O2X. Now, makes sense here that we want to have the flexibility of being able to adjust this and get this light away from our modifier, which is going to be this 1x1. What's the name of this small arm
This is
here?
the IOA 1. You want an IOA 2 longer arm?
Let's see it. Let me see how.
So the O2X comes with 4 arms, so you can make that adjustment. Have too long, too short, any length of arm.
Yep.
And so
I think let's do the longer arm because I can always make it shorter.
Yep, that's correct.
But I can't make it longer.
Okay. Actually,
I don't know what that means.
I'm sorry, but you can, because everything connects to everything else.
Right.
Didn't mean to diss you there, but
I don't mind being dissed occasionally. All right. So then this is going to go into here, right? So
Yep.
we go into there, and then we're going to reduce the size of that for now.
Okay.
And of course, just practice safe lighting and all that kind of stuff. We're going to basically, I'll let you tighten that down. We're going to go over one of our legs, and then what else are we going to do here? So
you want to reflect that into.
yeah. So what can we use what were we using to grab that before?
So what we did is, again, we took the same turnaround, which is male to male.
Right.
Go there, as we just did right there.
Right.
We're going to go here, drop that on, get an angle that would probably be the angle for that.
Yeah, we're going to have to, we might,
We'll adjust that
Yeah.
once we're set.
yeah.
But this will show what this stand can really do.
Okay, and then, okay, so yeah, this is going to work,
Okay.
I think. Because then I can also pull it back here, and I can take the M2, and I can rotate that, and I
Correct.
can really get it to any angle.
So
that I
that's a
want.
double ball joint sort of system there.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right.
Super.
Yeah. Okay, good. So you can see, yeah, that's going to work. So we are going to...
We're in a way too small a room, but we can do
We
this.
are, but hold on.
Yep.
Let's see what happens.
Yep. Lower
Drop
that
it down. Yeah, we'll see if we can make it. We may have to do it on just a regular stand just because of the height of the room.
I think we can do it.
You do? You
Yep.
feel good about it?
I feel good
All
about
right,
it.
Fine. I'm down.
So this will just give you an idea of
I've already been
how good the clamps are too.
dissed, so that's okay. I grew up in the 80s. I've been dissed many times.
Okay.
In New York, so trust me, I've been dissed.
So
okay.
you want to lean that a little bit more, or
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. Just saying.
how's that?
Yeah, that'll probably work. Yeah.
One stand, you guys.
So this is about as strong as it would be if I took if you've ever seen a quacker clamp or a duckbill clamp off of a grip head. So yeah, that'll work. Okay, good. So let's build this light out a little bit more. And that way, so now I have full flexibility. I actually have done this in the past a lot off of 2-stage little articulating arms, but it's sometimes tricky to get this exact position. So, again, remember the beautiful thing about this is if I need that light to be a little bit further out, I need it to hit this a little bit more. Do I have one of these yet?
Yep.
Okay, good. And I'm going to use that more. I've been using some shorter ones and stuff. All right, cool. So that'll do well. Okay, good. And then, of course, let's just show them the bags just so they see them, because it's not like you can't use them if you want to. Yeah, just so that they know that there's capabilities there.
And they're unique, too. We try to do nothing that's not unique. These are shot bags, stainless steel shot. So they won't rust, they won't leak, they won't bleed. They come as a set of 3 that Velcro together to make a donut, which I'm going to use on this stand. But individually, they also can go over a tube at the end of a boom and or the legs and make little booties. Sound isolation as well. If you have to turn it over and you're on a vibrating floor, it's amazing what stainless steel balls can do. So we're going to bag this up just to be sure.
Yep.
What's the weight of each one?
3.3 pounds. And a max 10, obviously, when they're together.
Yep.
Thank you. Great question.
This all makes sense, everybody, right? You can stand up and stuff. Hey, good to see you. It's been a while. I'm moving soon. I'll tell you about that. It's a little crazy. That's another story. Good. So now what we have here is we have the dimmer unit. So this is the dimmer unit for the 1x1 bicolor flex light from Westcott, and it's going into an M2. So I've got a ball mount here, which gives me some flexibility, and an IOC. So again, it's that whole idea. Now the back of this dimmer unit happens to have a 1/4-20 tap, so I can just go right into it with this. So I've got a 1/4-20 to the M2 ball mount, and then that's just attached to this clamp. So now I can put this anywhere I want. And the idea, and this is something that I've been doing for years off of C-stands, is we come into a really small space and we don't have a lot of space to work with. So how do we do that in a one-stand solution? And that's what we're doing here. If I wanted to, and I just wanted to make sure I didn't even get in the way of the adjustability of the light, I could put that down onto the bottom. And did you talk about, one of the things I love about the IOC, which is the clamp, is that it's rubberized on the inside. So I find that with a lot of other nano clamps and smaller clamp systems that I use, they're metal inside, and there's just nothing to protect it, or there's nothing that's part of the clamp that protects the things that you're putting them on. So even if I put it on a metal chair in an office or a location, I'm constantly putting things inside of here, little pieces of fabric. I go find rolls of toilet paper and I just roll them up, paper towels usually, toilet paper maybe not, but it's happened. And then I put those inside of there because I don't want to mar whatever that furniture is that I'm clamping to. So this is a soft-ish rubberized. It can be slid out if you need to, so if it ever needed to be replaced, it wouldn't be a problem.
Rubber. Yep.
And then in terms of the actual wideness of the clamp, it's pretty tremendous as well. So you can get this around most of the different things that you need to put them around. So I love that flexibility. You can check out that clamp if you want. I don't know if you want to.
I want to throw something in too.
I'm excited. Let me see. What you got? I know. I don't mean that facetiously. I am genuinely excited. Come on.
I'm here, of course, to sell Triad-Orbit stands, T3 stands, but I know you own some stands. You might like this IO system. This is called IORL. You put this over the stud on your current stand, lock it in place with the Allen screws, and now you are IO set for everything else you own. These are less than $30, and so production companies that I know are starting to have these on every stand because you keep the head in the light. That old screw in the side of a light is just so archaic, and they strip, and once it's stripped, it's gone. So if you used it just once to tighten it down and leave it, The other aspect of it is we have flat sides on both heads, and we have a hex at the bottom. So once you put a screw in here, that light is not spinning out. And how many times you set the light at the angle you want, but it spins out. So this is a solution for that as well. So that's IOR-L. That will convert any C-stand, lighting stand to I/O. We also have IOR-A, which is a microphone version. So if you have mic stands in your system and want to be able to swap that out, they can be converted as well. So the goal is to make everything I/O based. All right, I'm done.
I like that. I'm good. All right, so I guess we'll put somebody in the seat there. I'll put a camera up. But we want to kind of see what the quality of light is that we're getting here. So am I allowed to be over here in the aisle? Is that allowed? You sure?
Yeah.
All right. I don't know what the rules are here. There's a lot of rules in the B&H event space. There used to be less rules. No, I'm just kidding. Before we were live streaming to the world and all this kind of stuff. So just from an attachment standpoint, just to give you guys an idea of what I'm doing here, I can definitely take this flex light and I can go to mains. I can plug it into the wall and it comes with all of that stuff to do that. But when we're flying around, we can just get a little P-tap or D-tap cable. And so that's going directly from the dimmer unit that's off of the flex light. And then I'm going to plug that directly into a P-tap compatible battery system. Okay, doesn't matter which one you have as long as it has that tap there. The draw on this light at full power is about 55 watts. So on this particular battery I have, it's a 75 watt hour. I'm going to get over an hour at full power, well over an hour at full power. I have another battery in one of my rolling cases. It's a 150 watt hour battery. I get almost 3 hours on this particular light at full power. So that's pretty admirable in terms of what you can do. Ryan's going to show you also a cable management thing, which I love. Which is also part of the system. You do that, and then we'll turn this around, and we'll do our thing.
Just looking at this, and I'm kind of a neat freak, and I just hate these cables. That becomes, from a recording studio aspect, you always dress your cables. So we came up with a nice solution to do that. You can pass this around. This is called cable control. Comes in 3 sizes, and it is a springy PET recycled plastic bottle that you can reuse over and over and over and over again. So instead of Velcro or tape, I just line that up and it slides with it. So you can make your adjustments. And when we get the rest of the plug in here, this is the larger one and that'll go on the bottom. And that's it. And that cleans up your cable lines as well. So that'll come around. It's called cable control. It comes in a kit of 5 pieces and also dual pieces as well for the future. You just keep buying them.
We've got...
Sell.
What do we have here? We have stuff. Oh, you have another flex light here.
Yep. Also modified with an M2.
Nah, I'm going to do something else. Look at this little cute thing here. What's this little guy called?
That's TM, Triad Mini.
Okay, so this is great. Remember the book light I showed you earlier on? So I just want you to visualize this. A lot of the times when we have the book light up, it's a 4 foot by 6 foot high book light. And sometimes we want to get it up a little bit higher, just because somebody's standing up and they're 6'4" or whatever the situation is. So we want to raise that up a little. And historically, what we've done is we've taken shorties, short C-stands, and we've actually modified those and taken clamps, usually Cardellini clamps, and we just grip the 2 sides of the book light and we lift it up with 2 of those short C-stands. But we only need to raise the thing, a foot or 2 off the ground. So we can take something like the TM here, and it's great because it's adaptable. If you think about putting a ball mount here and then just one of those clamps, I can just clamp with an IOC on either side of the book light.
And or your book light's got 3/8 threads.
Exactly. And then just do that.
So I'm just going to thread a 3/8 IOH in there.
Yep.
And
then here's another thing. So do you see that? So I could literally do that with the book light as well, because the book light has the 3/8 threads. on every single tube.
But you need some aimability with that book light.
Right. Well, not this. I'm talking about the big.
All right, the
yeah,
big
but
one.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. But this, and then you could put OA on there.
Yep. And now you can aim that book light.
Yeah. So a
anywhere
lot of
you want.
flexibility with that as well. I'm going to actually just take a different light, which I think we have so this is the whole idea of you have a light and it's sitting inside of your kit. This is the Skylux light. This is a daylight balanced light. It has a lot of output, as you can see. It's a an LED light, daylight balanced. It is dimmable, so you can dim it pretty low. It's still got a lot of punch, maybe a little more punch than we want right now. We'll see. That's how bright it is. But what I have inside of it is I actually have the baby pin, this $20 baby pin from the I/O system. So that's just sitting inside of
IOH6.
IOH6. So they're numbered. So if you need baby pin at 6, what's quarter 20?
Quarter 20 is IOH4.
4 and 3/8.
3/8 is IOH3. And microphone is IOH1
Okay,
initially.
that's where you started.
That's where we started.
That just goes into here. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop that in. So just push it in, and then I have this adjustability. And now I have this little tiny stand, but it's a weighted stand, so I don't have to really worry about it going anywhere.
You want some aimability of that light, though.
Probably not, just
Okay.
because I have it in the this particular one. I can do that.
Okay.
So I think that'll be fine. But if I just wanted to have a little light here, and I just wanted to put a little something on the background, it'll give me a little something to do right there.
Got it.
So we're going to put somebody.
May we?
Yeah. So what we're going to do? Yeah, anybody. Let's go. You're in. Sorry. I did that on purpose. I'm just kidding. All right. I'm going to drop the sticks a little. And we're going to swing that around.
Yep.
And it's unfortunately going to go right behind. It's going to go right where you're sitting, probably. Probably. Let's see how it goes.
Don't want to block cameras here, but
Nope.
okay.
I'm going to go over here.
That's rule breaking.
Huh?
Blocking camera is
So I'm going to
rule
actually
breaking.
have you look in this direction right here, okay? So that'll do. And then I'm actually going to, if you'll just stand up for a second, just going to make a little adjustment. And normally this, in a normal production, Ryan would be the person as my stand-in who would be doing that. There we go. So that's sort of, there we go. And you're looking about here. I'll adjust camera height in a minute, but I just want you guys to kind of get a sense of what we're doing here. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring this in over here. I'll get the battery and stuff, in a second, but you can see we can just wheel this in. And yes, we're going to be blocking some things and all that fun stuff. And again, I'm just going to attach this to the dimmer unit so that we have this. And then we'll talk about color temperatures and balancing color and all that fun stuff in a second. But I'm just going to go ahead and attach that. I should have a full battery here. So there we are at 100%. And then the color temperature, this particular light goes from 2800 Kelvin, and I can go ahead and change that and go all the way up to 6000 Kelvin. So we have a nice range here. I'll dial it down to just a standard tungsten color temperature. So I'm going to set that at 3200 Kelvin. And we are going to, I think, drop the house lights. Is that cool? And we'll start to see what this starts to look like, right? So we're taking a 1x1 source, and we are changing it into a 4x4 source. Because this flex light is actually no longer our key light anymore. And you guys can move to this side if you can't see the screen very well. But you can see how quickly and easily off of one stand we can create a nice light here. And if you were going to go ahead and interview our subject, and you can see that we have a nice big catch light in her eyes, and that's because we're creating a much larger source. I'm assuming it's pretty comfortable for you in terms of light levels. It doesn't feel too hot or anything like that because we're using LEDs, so it's producing hardly any heat. Overall, the only thing that we have to do here is we're going to have to make adjustments in terms of the color temperature so that we're matching the light that we're using right now. So we had changed that to tungsten, so now I've gone in and I've actually changed my white balance to tungsten on the color. I will not take any responsibility for that screen right there. So I can see what's on here and it's a little bit better, but I'm just not taking responsibility for that. This is kind of the idea. I don't want that light to spill onto her. What's your name? Dumaris.
Yes.
Okay, Dumaris. But what I've got is I've got a camera system that is set to a tungsten color temperature for white balance. I'm using tungsten as my key source, and then I'm using a daylight balanced light for my background light. And so what we get is we get a really nice warm, cool contrast when we do that, okay? The other thing that you can do very easily is you can do a cool contrast or match your color temperature. So if I'm going to go ahead and take this light now, and I'll bring the flex light up to about 5600 Kelvin, and we go ahead and I'm now going to, of course, change my white balance on my camera system. Then if I change that, now we basically are matching or getting close to matching color temperatures for our key and our background light. The other way is not a way I want to show you, which is where we use daylight for talent and we use tungsten for the background. It doesn't do well for skin tones. People don't look as healthy when you do that. So a cool warm contrast in terms of foreground background doesn't usually play as well. But it definitely plays well to do matching color temperatures. So it could be tungsten. It could be matching color temperatures daylight. Or in the case of what we showed in the beginning, we have tungsten for our key or our main source of light. That could include fill and everything else. And then what we would do is we would actually use daylight or some version of that for our background color. So we get this warm, cool contrast overall. I'm not saying our exposure is exactly where it should be right now, but you know, and if I drop my ISO here and we start to look at an image in terms of stuff, and I can open this up. Obviously, if I open it up more, we're getting a shallower depth of field. But you guys get the basic idea. I'm just opening up the aperture right now. But even if I wanted to go back up to sort of, for modern digital cameras, a sort of standard, maybe shooting an f4 to an f5.6 for an interview, unless we had good autofocus. The dual pixel autofocus on a camera like the C300 Mark II is redonkulous. I mean, you can actually shoot it at 2.8 and you can keep people in focus. It's that good for stuff. It's really, really good. But let's just say we're shooting an f4 at an ISO 800. This is not the most powerful light in the world. We don't have a lot of ambient light, so let's just acknowledge the fact that we're not dealing with a lot of ambience here. But we are getting a nice exposure, and we're in a relatively small space, and we're already still throwing that background out of focus. Yes, sir?
But you're getting some assist from this big white screen. I mean, if you were in this here, but if you were in a dark room, you'd have to mimic something like this now?
You could. I mean, we are getting a little bit of return here. If I was going to do that normally, what I would do is I would just walk in some sort of fill. I have, and I mean, here, I'll show you. I have something in the bag. I always have something. I was something, kid. Hold on.
I'm anticipating you.
I know you are. But I'm gonna yell at you. We got to come in from the other side.
Oh, that's right. Always
okay.
opposite the key light.
Yeah. So there you go.
There's a shadow.
So I'm gonna have you look, have camera right, and we're just gonna bring in a little bit of fill here. Okay. If you want to be, you're tall and lanky too. That's a good thing, I guess. You're gonna go ahead and hold up. This is actually the floppy cutter for the DP kit. Okay. That's at 4x8, but it's just a piece of duvetine. So what we can do is we can just sort of mimic. So I'm just gonna basically have you kind of do this, okay? We can bring that in. That's our negative fill. We can block some of that ambient light. Or you could even really go crazy because you're tall and I'm not, and you can hold it up like this, okay? And then I'll just mimic sort of what we would do if we weren't getting a lot of bounce. We're getting bounce off the ceiling too, because we've got a relatively low ceiling. So if you were in a space that had dark walls, or you didn't have enough contrast and you need to create it, you could do that. Let's create the contrast. So walk that in pretty close to talent. And then if I wanted to, then I could go ahead and I can just bring in a reflector and I could just set that in place, and then I can go ahead and fill that the way I want to. Okay? So I have that ability to do it. I have a question for you, actually. Let's get rid of that for a second, because I want to recreate something I haven't done with you yet. And we have another stand, which I'm excited about. Do we have like an M2? I want to go ball mount to ball mount with a clamp.
I'm running out of reverses.
I know. And if you don't have it, it's okay. we can create it after this, and I can show it to people when we do a different setup. How are we doing on time, by the way?
11 minutes.
Are you serious?
Yep.
Dang.
Yep.
That's pretty
You can do a
good.
lot in a way.
That's true. We can do it. Let's do the mic setup then. Let's do it. That's more important, okay? We'll stay for a few minutes after the event, and we can answer questions for people who are here. But let's go ahead. You guys have seen the lighting, right? It's pretty simple. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here. I love side lighting also. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll do the same exact setup with this particular setup. But think about this flipping over so that the 4x4 is going down towards the ground, okay? And then we're pushing the light through it. I can put the diffusion panel through it. So that's also another really nice way to do it.
John, I got a question on lighting.
Yeah.
Do you ever use a light meter
I do.
on set? And can you show that?
I don't have a light meter with me. I do use a light meter. Very oftentimes we're using tools like a waveform monitor, which I should be able to bring up on here. I don't know why it's not pushing it because it's a C100 Mark I. We'll use sometimes a histogram, generally a waveform monitor, which gives you the ability to see where your luminance levels are. I use light meters primarily now for lighting ratios. Sorry for scratching my mic. So if you're shooting something and you're shooting in lots of different spaces and you want to consistently light your talent in the background at different stops, then a light meter is fantastic for that because it measures a three-dimensional space, because you can walk to a place and take an incident reading of that particular place. So if you're always going to light talent at 2.8 and then you want to make sure that your background is 2 stops darker, then you can meter your background as you're lighting at a 1.4, and then you know that consistently you've got 2 stops difference. So for me, a meter, most of the time, in an incident meter is primarily used for me for lighting ratios. And then the second way I use a meter now is for color metering. Newer color meters are actually great, not old ones, because they don't necessarily read LEDs and some of these newer fixtures the proper way. So there's some exciting stuff happening there. Watch my YouTube channel in a few weeks. I got something to show you. And by the way, this right now is, I'm just going to actually take a look at this. This is actually more of what the image will look like. I actually was shooting in log before, but the way the Canon C100 and Canon C100 Mark II works is they are Rec. 709 cameras. They don't have the wider color gamut in those two cameras. So you're already inside of that Rec. 709 color space, so it's very easy to color grade. It's very easy to work with the image even though you're using that log flatter image profile. So this is now with it turned off, and you can see it's a little more contrasty without the log on there. It's not necessarily where I want the image to be, and I'd have to go into the menus and stuff, but I just wanted to show you that before we were actually looking at a log image. I was going in here and I was turning on this log feature. And so when we color grade this, it'll actually be a little bit different in terms of contrast and things like that. But it still gives you a sense of the lighting. And then here we are with a T3. We've got 01 and basically going directly out. So unlike this particular piece here, which is the 02X, where we have the 2 ball mounts and we have this like infinite adjustability, we're going with a more traditional boom arm here. We've got a ball mount here, right, that we have, though that's the non-traditional part of it because it's so adjustable. And then we're going into here into an M2, and now we have full adjustability in terms of where our boom can come from. And we always boom from the opposite side of the key because of shadows. So if we're booming from that side, then we can cast shadows on talent. So, you know, with a little bit of fill here, you know, we can either make it a little more contrasty, a little less. And I also can play with this. Obviously, I can wrap this light around a little bit more, and I can bring it more towards this side, and we can start to see what happens. And just so you can get a sense of the image overall. And you're still looking to that side of camera. And now we start to move a little bit more towards our standard Rembrandt lighting. When we start to swing around here, you see that little triangle of light on the right side of her face. And so, you know, we can do a lot of different things. But this is a one light setup here with the DP kit, all based on T3 for all of our stuff. We're using the TM, which is the Triad Mini over here. That's being used for the Skylux light. And it's not the only way we can use this. I mean, there's some really fantastic other modifiers that are out there. Just to show you, we have one more T3 can we just get a
We do.
baby pin on there?
Yeah.
Oh, actually, it's built into the Skylux already.
Yep.
We just have to take it out of the TM.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is actually something I've been using a lot too. This is called the Rapid Box. It's an Octa XL box. It comes with different types of mounts. You can get it with Profoto. This happens to be a Bowens mount. And it's a Bowens mount because the Skylux light is a Bowens mount, which obviously means that you can adapt it very easily. What I love about this is there's no traditional speed ring. So you just go like this, and it just, there's a few things out there in the market that do that. The mic just got destroyed there, just so you know, the lob. It was like somebody just took their headphones off and is cursing me in somewhere, Romania. Somebody in Romania is cursing me right now. So what you can do is you can, and actually the price of this Skylux just went down recently, and they're doing kits now with these Octo boxes. But basically, I should actually do this the right way. My grip is so efficient that the light is already set up. But basically, I'm going to turn around because I'm going to be that person that should be. And you basically can just go in here and we can just click that in. It's just a standard Bowens mount. And now we've taken this light and we've created a very nice soft source. But look how fast that is. So combined with the T3, we get a really nice soft source. I don't have the baffle inside of here, which would get rid of the hotspot. I just don't have it inside the light right now. But look what kind of output you can get out of this light at full power. So there's a lot of output out of this Skylux using a modifier like that. And again, this would be a great example if I was going to go ahead. Actually, let's do it. We have like 2 minutes. So what I want to do is I want to flip this down so that it just becomes, we can just take it off actually.
Okay.
Let's just take it off, that modifier. Do you need my hand?
Yeah.
You got it?
I don't want to drop it.
Yeah, I got it. And
Okay.
got it? Okay, so you're going to basically, we're going to wheel this out.
Okay.
And I need crew. You're going to be my crew over here. You're going to be over on this side. I feel like we're going to accomplish something. I'm not sure if we are, but I'm trying here, everybody. So this I need to unplug. So Ryan, I need your help. We're trying to get one more lighting setup in here. That's good, right? Do we want to?
Yep.
Or we don't, everybody? Yeah. Yeah, okay. The guy in Romania doesn't want me to. I can tell you that. It's like,
You want this light off?
yeah, we're gonna in a second. Let me just strike this one first. Let's plug it into here. Just looking for things. Da da da.
You want to reflect back on.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually have you not reflect in the beginning, so just have it walk it out. We'll kind of take a look at what this does. Okay, we're gonna kill. Oh, we have a lot. We're gonna kill that light, please, sir. Still, it already looks pretty good.
off on
That
it?
one, yeah, we can do that, or there.
There we go.
Bingo. Okay, so you're gonna kind of look a little bit low.
Wow.
See how nice that catch looks right there? And let's just Hollywood in that fill. So just bring that in, lift it up a little bit. Okay, and so this is sort of more of a traditional side lighting. See how big and nice that catch is? And we're gonna bring it in a little bit closer. So just walk that in and lift it up a little bit. I will adjust where my boom's coming from, but it's just to kind of give you guys a sense of what it looks like. And this is, and then rotate towards you, the frame. Bingo, right there. So you see how fast that is, everybody? I mean, this is side lighting with a return fill. It's simple, you know. We've got that Octo box. As long as you don't have a lot of ambient light in your space, it's very easy to light this way, you know. And as long as you're, you know, this is again at an f1.4. We can make it dreamier at a an f4. If I go ahead and we'll drop, actually what I'm gonna have to do, which is ridiculous, so I'm gonna have to add ND here. So I'll add ND, that's how sensitive these cameras are nowadays. So you can see what that looks like. And it's a nice, pretty picture, right? Now it's at a 1.4, but
I'm going to add something.
yes, do it.
She needs to read from her
Oh, you're
confidence
gonna, yeah, so you're
monitor.
gonna look directly to,
So-
look directly to camera.
We're often using an iPad for it. This is iOrbit. This is our iPad
House lights
holder.
up.
House lights.
Thank you. Got it.
This is our iPad holder. It adjusts in multiple ways. It can go as small as a 4S, and it's got a movable center point, and it can go as large as an iPad Pro. It comes with the IOC clamp. They have them here. They're $99 complete. And so with that IOC clamp, I'm going to come right off of the camera, and it won't mess up these nice carbon fiber legs.
We're going to center frame.
And snap that in. And now with that ball joint, I can get that in any position that she needs. When you see that right there, can you read it?
We can even raise it up a little bit.
Yep.
So I can have it right off of the top of this leg and just have it right underneath the lens there.
Yep.
And then that way we have basically an ability to control that, and we could prompt or something like that. So pretty easy way to do that, also using IOC, M2, right to...
Actually, it's Triad-Orbit. It all comes together.
Oh, that's the particular one. That's that whole kit. That's
it's the whole kit.
And you know what I use that kit for? I use it for chip charts. So when I'm on set, sometimes we'll just go ahead and we'll clamp that, and we'll have a chip chart. So like an X-Rite chart or a DSC Labs chart. And instead of putting an iPad in there, we put a chip chart in there, and then we just have it sitting in frame, and we have it on the stand, and we just walk it in, and then we walk it out, and it works out pretty well. We're going to wrap it up right now. Let's thank Ryan, first of all, from Triad-Orbit.
Thank you.
We thank my friends at Westcott, and there's been a lot of synergy here. Yep. And I hope everybody learned something today. Thank you very much.